So this will be new for me. Thank you everybody for coming here today and joining us for this transition planning meeting. I'm glad to be here, be able to talk with everyone. We know that this is a very important subject for the farm families out there in the community. We want to make sure that you're fully equipped, have everything ready for you so that we can keep our family farms operational and successful for many, many generations to come. So I want to make this very, very open and relaxed. So anybody cut me off if you have questions, catch my attention, interrupt me halfway through. I want to address everyone's questions as we go through, and we're going to cover a handful of different subjects here today. So first off, getting started, just taking a brief moment to introduce myself. My name's Eric Finoris. I'm a certified financial planner, and I own an independent financial planning agency. We're centralized in Thurmont, Maryland, so it's just north of Frederick. We've been working with Nationwide for a number of years. I was part of the Nationwide exclusive agency channel a number of years back, just specifically targeting towards financial planning. And our role within my agency is to partner with P&C or home and auto insurance agencies that cover your farms. And we offer an extension of their services through financial planning, health insurance, and life insurance benefits. So we have a number of relationships with various different insurance agencies, and we've worked with Nationwide through this farm transition planning program since 2013. As we're going to go through some of the information here today, this is a conversation targeting transition of your farm, understanding some of the challenges that we face as a family farm operation, how you can address some of those, and making sure that you're better prepared moving forward with it. And we want to start off with a introductory video to speak about what this Land is Your Legacy program is that's offered through Nationwide. Give you a little bit of an understanding of exactly why they put this together, some of their history in the agricultural community, and just make sure that you've got everything that you need. So before we get started here, I want to ask, who here has gone through and set up a transition plan for your family farm? Who here has thought about setting up a transition plan? Perfect. That's the challenge that we face with most of our farm families. Is sometimes it's too big of a task that we put it off and put it off, and you just hope that that day never comes where it becomes a necessity. But farm families, one of the biggest things that we face as a challenge is the nature of how your business runs compared to every other business in America. It's very family oriented. And the family harmony is one thing that we want to make sure is absolutely preserved. Most of us live on the land in which we're farming. So you can't separate yourself family-wise from the farm, from the business. And so family harmony is usually the biggest challenge in starting and opening these conversations, making sure that everyone's on the same page and it can be a comfortable conversation. Nobody feels threatened or anything like that. So I'm going to start today with this video. Just bear with me for a moment. If you can't hear it, I'm going to try and turn up the volume. It plays through the computer, so I hope that it's loud enough for everyone.
Obviously, everybody wants to leave their legacy better than what you had.
When we hit a certain age, it seemed like we knew that we needed to get something done so that we could preserve the farm for our two daughters.
We procrastinated about it. So this was the first time that we actually went ahead and did anything.
In farming, we're by ourselves a lot, and we have to open up to other people about everything we've got and everything we want done. And it's really hard for a farmer to do because we're self-sufficient, stubborn, and we don't like to think that it's ever going to end.
We didn't know what to do or where to go. And once we saw the Land is Your Legacy program, we both talked about it. And so that's what we need to do. We need to do this for our family to preserve the farm so that our grandkids have something to inherit when we're gone.
That's one thing about Nationwide that we've liked, that they took that initiative and got that into our heads that we need to plan for this if we want it to continue.
We actually started estate planning 2 or 3 years ago. The challenge is we're finding the time to do it. You know, we're running out of time because we're getting older, and then find someone knowledgeable enough that knew how to do it right. working with Nationwide, they listened, they gathered information and listened to us what we wanted to actually do. And then they came back to us and told us how we could do it and how financially we could do it. And then they told us a couple other things maybe we hadn't thought about that we should be looking at.
The team seemed like they had, well, they did have our best interest at heart. What can we do for you and for your farm so that we can help you or assist you in keeping it with the family? Taking all of our information to the Nationwide team, the legacy team, you had a group of advisors who were experts in each field. And so we went to one spot and got great service without us trying to pick and choose, on a menu of who we go to for this and that. They all work together. They all know their fields, and it felt comfortable. It felt professional.
Things can change from this year to next year. Now we've got a baseline.
We have everything all set now. We're good for whatever happens in life.
By laying everything out and having the team from Nationwide, from Land and Legacy, go over all of our positions where we're at right now, we can see where we've come. And we also started us a vision of where we want to be. Instead of just surviving year to year to year, we have an idea of where we want to be and what we want to leave.
After it was all over, we looked at each other and we're like, this just feels good to have this taken care of.
If we don't determine what we're going to do, someone else will. And so by being the main part of it, we set our own destiny.
All right, so that video it was put together by Nationwide recently, but I think it really speaks to a lot of the farming community. When it starts up, there's different farm families that are talking about that the burden to get started. They weren't sure where to begin. They weren't sure how to address the conversations or where to take the first step. Who here knows a family just like that? Who here is a family just like that? So that's really what we want to try to do, is bring all of these together, give you a foundation today, and make sure that you're ready to keep a successful farm moving forward. In today's conversation, we're going to hit on a couple different topics. First off, who is Nationwide? Why is Nationwide part of the Maryland Farm Bureau? Why are they here today? Why did they bring me in to present this subject to you? Second off, we're going to talk about the Land is Your Legacy program, what they've developed, and certain aspects of it that whether you go through the program yourself or just take some bits away from it and make sure that you're putting some thought behind your own family plan, we're going to make sure that you're addressing all of the necessary aspects that are unique to the farming community. And then finally, really, where do you get started? Too many people just aren't quite sure how to take that first step or where you go next. So we want to try and give you that foundation so that you're more prepared here today when you leave this room. So when you think of Nationwide, what does everyone think of? Insurance. So I've got some cheesy gimmicks to get more participation today. So you get a hot chocolate setup. So insurance, that's a common one. Anyone have anything else when you think of Nationwide? Peyton Manning. I am a personal Colts fan, so that's near and dear to me. A lot of times what we hear is the Nationwide is on your side, the jingle, the insurance. Many people know Nationwide. They're a nationally recognizable brand. They're, I think, a Fortune 100 company. They might be almost a Fortune 50 company. So one of the biggest countries or companies in this country. Everyone knows them. Everyone recognizes them. But not a lot of people know the history of where they come from. Nationwide is so committed to the farming community because of where their roots come from. So they were founded by farmers to be a farm insurance company. It was a group that came together looking for products that they could develop to be better positioned for the unique risks and unique needs of the farming community. And they've held true to that over their history. So since 1909, when they were founded, Nationwide has continued to build deeper and deeper roots into the agricultural community. As they were positioning products and using insurance, protecting your farms, we started to notice in the early 2000s a trend developing in our farms across the country. And it wasn't a good trend. We see far too commonly farms are not adequately prepared to transition successfully to the next generation. And so in 2011, Nationwide developed the Land is Your Legacy program. They've kept to their roots that most of their board members today are still active farmers. So they've lived off of their own experiences, seeing their own family farms pass from the generation down to them, and in looking forward to the next generations to come. They saw the need for developing a program that they could distribute to the farming community to really give you the information and the tools to start those conversations and start planning for the future. I think statistically, it's about 70% of our farms today are not successfully transitioning to the next generation. That was really the root and the foundation of building this Land is Your Legacy program today. And Nationwide is committed to continuing this culture moving forward and staying as one of the leading agribusiness insurers across the country. When we talk about the Land is Your Legacy team and how this was all put together, Nationwide has a team of professionals, a number of advanced consultants, attorneys, CPAs, experts in the field of what they do. They're specializing in farming challenges and some of the tax law and legal challenges and estate issues that farm families face across the country. So this team of the advanced consultants is who we use when we go through working with a farm family to leverage some of their information. There's nobody who wants to be a jack of all trades and master of none. You've got to know who to turn to for the right points of advice and for the right information when. That's really where they are critical through this process. Is you've got an advisor like myself working with a farm family like yours. We have a team behind us that can speak specifics to the legal natures and the dynamics of farm law, some of the tax bills that are being proposed, and really help to guide you along that. Now, none of these professionals are active in practicing dealing with clients themselves. So all of them are there just to be the backup support to make sure that we can get the right information to you and keeping the information updated as best as possible. So it's critical that you still have your own team of professionals around you, that you have a attorney yourself that you work with, a CPA that you work with, and we can help to build that for you if you don't have good contacts. Beyond Nationwide's Land is Your Legacy team of advanced consultants, part of their roots has in insurance, which was the first thing we think of when we think of Nationwide. They've developed products outside of just their liability programs. So farm insurance. Anybody have current farm insurance through Nationwide? There's a number of them. They're one of the largest insurers out there. But not many people realize that they've created specific underwriting tables for their life insurance products as well. So Nationwide, seeing the need of farmers to have insurance, they created specific underwriting tables that give you advantage underwriting classes and advantage pricing based on some of the risks that we see and some of the common lifestyles that we see in the farming community. Things like tobacco use or build, so body mass index. We understand the manual labor that's necessary for farming. And so they've built their underwriting tables specifically to target that community and give you the best advantage pricing that they can. Now, why is transition such a big concern? So you'll notice that we use the word transition through planning. We don't use succession. And the reality is when Nationwide developed this program, we don't just want your farm and your operation to pass to the next generation. We want it to transition and continue as an operation for many, many generations to come. So we want to be working with you on a multi-generational level so that you're preparing the next generation to be able to take over with the resources that they need and the education and the mentorship that they're going to need to be able to run the farm. And the tools that are still going to be there that Nationwide can help to support on an ongoing basis. We have over 2 million family farms across the country today. And it's a big need to start planning for transition because the average age of farm families typically is close to 60 years old. There's two things inevitable in life: death and taxes. And so as we age, it becomes something that we need to start planning for what does happen when we start to exit the farm and pass it down to the next generation. As we see our farm families aging, and with an average age around age 60, it certainly is a concern that we want to make sure that that next generation is doing what they need to now before it's too late to learn how to best be able to take over the operation. Less than a third of family farms have a formalized transition plan. Now, farms are a unique asset. It's a lot of land. It's a lot of illiquid assets that make up your estate. So it's hard to transition. And it's sometimes money is an ugly thing. The value that comes with a farm transitioning down sometimes can disrupt the one thing that's most important to the family harmony itself. So we want to make sure that whatever your wishes are written out and communicated to the family so that there's no emotions that are going to burden the need of the transition and the operation moving forward. So how do we look to actually start building a plan? And what do you need to start thinking about as you're developing what your intentions are moving forward? There's a number of different professionals that are going to be involved. So I want you all to start thinking about who your professional team is around you currently. Who do you use as your attorney, as your CPA, as your insurance agency? Are they equipped, or are they well versed in your industry specifically? So not all attorneys understand the dynamics and the nuances with estates of farms. It's a different type of asset. Not all CPAs understand the tax deductions of expenses through farms. So you want to make sure that your team is built around you with people who actually understand your business, your family, and what you're trying to do with it. As you're developing your transition plan for the next generation, there's 5 key points that we always want to make sure that you're addressing. First off, succession planning itself. So thinking through who is going to be the next leader in your family, the next leader on the farm that can manage and run the business, run the operation. Not all family members are prepared in the same manner. I'll use my family as a perfect example. I'm the youngest of 4. All of us have gone entirely different directions. Here I am today as a financial planner. My sister, who is a PhD, who runs a lab down at Johns Hopkins. My brother is in engineering. My other sister, she went into acting. And so all very different natures as to how us children growing up under the same roof, the same household, we took very different paths. Not all of us have that same leadership capability. When we get together for family functions, my oldest sister is always the one who hosts. She's the one who, when everyone else says, well, I don't know, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? She's the one who finally comes in and makes the last decision and says, here's what's happening, puts together the plan. So it's important for you to look at your own families and figure out who is that next successor, the leadership, the manager, and who's going to be able to run the operation. Now, my sister, who's good at making those decisions, she's great at delegating. My brother and I were typically the backbone. Whenever there were projects that needed to be done, we were the ones who would go out and do all of the work for it. So it's important, again, to identify who's going to be the worker, who's going to be the leader, who's going to run the business, and who's going to run the books of the operation. Sometimes it can be the same person. Sometimes there'll be various different members of your family. But everything that operates in your head for running your own business, sometimes it's hard for us to realize what all that was when it's not written out after you're gone. So having that open line of communication, starting to mentor and teach and train the next generation on some of those responsibilities is very important. So that's the who. The what is next, the business planning itself. Businesses come in all sorts of different structures. So part of what you need to be looking at is, how is your operation set up? Do you have a formalized business structure? Is it a C corporation, an S corporation, a partnership, an LLC? All of them have different nuances in how they run as an operation and then how they're taxed. So it's important for you through your planning process to look at your operation itself and understand what's going to be the most successful business operation and business structure. What we see commonly in family farms is the operation itself runs as a sole proprietor. You're the one who wakes up every morning, gets the job done, and brings in the income that's going to support your family. That's how a typical sole proprietorship works. A lot of times, though, people then try and shelter their assets, their land, through LLC companies. So you might have a different business entity holding your equipment and your land than what you have for your operation. Sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not. It's worth reviewing and figuring out how exactly your operation flows and what the key players are that need to be decision makers. So part of the planning process is always going to look at not only who's going to be the next successor, the next generation to take over and leader for the farm, but how is that business going to continue to function beyond the senior generation running it now. Next, you have risk management. So risk management speaks to a number of different things. Everything from your equipment, your land itself, homeowners insurance, auto insurance, equipment insurance, making sure that nothing is going to go wrong, crop insurance. We've had I had a story of a farmer close by to where my office is that unfortunately somebody kept putting equipment out in their fields and it would damage the combine. So risk management like that to try and make sure that your equipment stays running and that your farm can still continue to function. The other things that are commonly overlooked is health insurance. Family farms don't have the benefit and the luxury of company benefits all the time. Maybe if you've got a husband and wife and one person has a 9-to-5 job off the farm, you can bring back company benefits for the family, but it's not always the nature of it. So health insurance is important, making sure that you're preparing and planning for that, the transition into Medicare, and then with long-term care. As we age, it's inevitable. Our bodies aren't quite able to do what we used to do when we were younger. So looking back at myself, I laugh because I see a couple of people laughing out here. When I've got people in the office that make fun of me all the time. I grew up wrestling my whole life. And so I've wrestled from the time I was 5 all the way through college. And I was always very athletic, always very mobile and able to do things. And I always just had this keep going perseverance. I had someone come to me in my early 20s and ask if I would run the marathon with them in Baltimore. And of course I said, sure, why not? I had never run more than about 7 miles in my life before. I encourage nobody to run a marathon at this point. There's a reason that we have wheels. But as we age, I notice my knees and my joints don't quite move the way they used to. It's inevitable. As we age, we're going to start to wear out over time. So what kind of risks does your health impose on the farm? Either from the lack of ability to be able to do what you used to, move quite as much stuff as you used to, or simply, as we have an aging generation, the ability to be able to provide the care that's necessary for you while you're at home, while still having someone, the younger generation, able to work the farm and have enough sustainable income to support a family. Financial independence, that leads perfectly into this. Financial independence is sometimes hard for farm families to grasp. Who here plans on retiring? I see a couple hands. I see Margie back here. So in farm families, typically we plan on working as long as we can. There's never a thought of leaving the farm, of stepping back. But financial independence, just because of us aging and over time being less able to do what we used to, you need to be preparing for that future. As you are farming and bringing in income to support your family, think of what the next generation, how much income do they need to bring in through that same farm if they're to take it over from you? What if you're still living off of that same income? Is your farm able to sustain 2 households the way it used to sustain 1? As families grow, as we have more children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, You need to start thinking about how do you start to remove yourself from the farm while still being able to mentor and coach the next generation to be prepared to do what's necessary and still be successful through it. So trying to think of how you can save for your own future and what's going to provide income for multiple generations as the next one in line steps up. And then finally, estate planning. Estate issues are a major concern when it comes to farms. So we've got estate taxation that potentially comes into play. When you've got a large illiquid asset like the land of your farm, I have one farm family not too far from my office that I kind of grimace every time that I drive by where they used to be. It's because now it's a super Walmart. The parents, when they passed away, they did not have a well-built plan. And their son, when he inherited all of the land, the value in the land itself, he couldn't pay the estate costs. So this was a number of years back where the estate tax was at a higher threshold or more commonly encountered. Estate tax is still a major issue. And so unfortunately, when it comes to farms and you've got land as your primary value, the only way to liquidate that is through a sale sometimes. So what we want to do is make sure that you've got your estate plans set up, not only for estate costs and settlement issues, but if you've got more than one child. I told you I'm a family of 4. All of us do very different things. We don't expect that all of our children are going to want to have the same involvement in the farm. Maybe some of them want to move off of the farm, get involved in different careers. Maybe there's only one of 4 who wants to be involved. So you need to make sure that your estate documents are in order, that it's not going to disrupt the farm, and that operation can continue on. So as you're looking to build the team of professionals around you, part of what the Land is Your Legacy program does is we try to serve as, I'm a football fan. You referenced Peyton Manning earlier. I told you I'm a Colts fan. We like to serve as the quarterback. Everyone on the field has a different role. The wide receiver is not going to do the running back's job. The linemen are not going to do the tight end's job. So each of these people need to be specialized in what it is that they're doing. Your attorneys, your insurance agents, your CPAs. What we work to do is try and coordinate all of that through the advanced consulting team with Nationwide, so that you're not wasting time sitting in front of each of these different professionals and racking up their hourly rate. Attorneys aren't cheap. The most recent bill that I saw from an attorney was over $400 an hour. So if by going through the planning, you can have your ideas kind of consolidated and come to the table a little bit more prepared, rather than having an attorney have to walk you step by step and adding on extra hours to that bill. Sometimes that can be a good savings in and of itself. So but what we try to do is coordinate that everything works in conjunction. Attorneys aren't always looking at tax issues. CPAs aren't always looking at risk issues with insurance. And so we want to make sure that everything is working in unison and not that you're kind of being pulled in different directions. So I want to go through some of what the Land is Your Legacy program is designed to deliver and provide for you. So first off, as you go through and you create a plan through the Land is Your Legacy team, you'll get presented with a binder, a number of different key points within there. The first one is going to be an overview of what your family structure is and your total picture in kind of a snapshot. Shows you your family diagram, what your goals are, what family members you've identified as who you want the successors in your farm to be, what your net worth is, and what some of the key risks or goals are that you're facing. So we try to outline some of the objectives that you're looking to create and some of the concerns that need to be addressed with that, whether it's equality amongst the estate. If you've got some family members who don't want to be part of the farm operation moving forward. Maybe it's estate planning documents. Maybe your will or power of attorneys don't name things correctly the way that you've said that you want them to. Maybe it's just a business structure planning, that you need to have an operational structure rather than just everything runs in your head and nobody is familiar, if anything were to happen to you, how we can continue that in the same manner. So, but that's what the first page of the Land is Your Legacy program does, is it tries to give you a snapshot to it. Then we look at addressing some of your estate planning issues. So I'll give you an example here of a family that I've worked with recently. Farm family that comes from two different farming households. And as it's consolidated to the husband and wife currently, they both come from different roots. They want to pass on their farm to their son. They have one son that's going to take over the operation, but they have more than just their farm. So not all of their land that they own is used for farming. Not all of their home, their investments, their estate is used for farming. So they've tried to identify some other extended relatives that they also want to leave some assets behind to. One of the challenges that this farm family faces is their estate documents simply are set up to leave assets, a total sum to certain percentages of each family member. Doesn't identify what's business related and what's not. And so if you just simply segregate out 10% here, 10% there, 20% here, what if the farm itself encompasses 80% of your total net worth? Have you now forced a division of that? Or have you left the person who's going to take over the operation with just land and no capital to actually operate things moving forward? Maybe as you are looking for purchasing for the coming year, there's not cash available on hand just simply because of timing. So we want to make sure that your estate planning documents are addressing this. Think of your power of attorney. I would encourage everyone in this room, you should have a will and power of attorney set up. Power of attorneys for financial and healthcare. Make sure that you've identified who you want to be the decision maker. God forbid anything happens that you're incapacitated or unable to make decisions and conduct business on your own. You don't want your farm operation bank account tied to just you if something were to suddenly happen and now no one can access those records or that account. So we do want to make sure that your estate documents are well put together. The next thing that comes up very commonly in farms is estate equalization. So we understand that not every child is going to, again, have the same role on the farm. If you have one child who's going to be the farmer continuing on, but three that are going to have a career outside of the farm, how do you equalize that? How do you make sure that everyone is treated fairly? What we always say is equal is not always fair. Fair is not always equal. We want to make sure that the sanctity and the ability of the farm operation is preserved. If that means that the one child who is going to be inheriting the farm gets a larger stake of the estate, is it something that you're comfortable with? What you don't want to do is have an uninterested party, someone who has a career elsewhere, lives out of state, having operational decisions in the farm itself. So don't divide land between multiple family members if they're not going to be involved in the operation. Sometimes estate equalization is something that we need to address. How do you leave something that makes you feel comfortable, that you didn't simply write certain children out of your will per se, that you're giving them what you feel is an equitable stake in the total estate value, while still not disrupting the farm and still leaving the assets behind to be able to operate for generations to come. Finally, and most importantly, through the Land is Your Legacy program, we provide a checklist. So our role as advisors is not to come and preach to you. We don't want to show up and tell you what you need to do. Our goal is to be independent and working in your interest. We want to provide you with information and with options. Not every farm operates the same. Not every family operates the same. We understand that. What we want to do is educate you on various different techniques that farms can use between wills, trusts, charitable giving, legacy gifts to family, and various different business structures, and provide you the information that you can then make an educated decision. On that, we want to provide a checklist, because we can sit here and talk until we're blue in the face and write out all the greatest plans in the world. No one ever executes anything, nothing was accomplished. So we want to have you create your own timeline. And what you'll see, if you can see on the slide up here, is that there's a date to finish column to the right. I love that because we're not going to tell you when you need to finish something. We want you to make that decision. We understand that you might prioritize things differently. So one farm family I'm working with right now has said what their top 4 priorities are. And we've created a schedule for them. Number 1 priority, number 2 priority, and so on. We then put in dates that we're going to hold them accountable for it. They're going to hold themselves accountable. Because if you think that you need to update your will, but 10 years from now are still thinking the same thing, you haven't really accomplished anything. I asked to start this presentation, who here had thought about preparing it and setting up a transition plan? Until you actually take that first step forward, we're no better off than we were yesterday. So we want to create an action plan and an agenda, and we want you to set the time limits on it. Don't feel like you're rushed to make decisions. Don't feel like you have to be held to have a gun held to your head to make a decision. We want you to make that decision and work with your family the way that it's necessary to keep, again, the family harmony and the family sanctity. So how do we begin those conversations? Any questions so far as we're going through everything? Okay. Beginning conversations is the hardest part. Where do we bring the family together? How do we bring the family together? We want to share with you a couple different family stories here. And this one in particular, of an end of an era, was someone who's part of the Land is Your Legacy team at Nationwide. As their family was set up, the grandparents utilized what we refer to as an I love you will. Anyone ever heard of that? So an I love you will is the simplest version. We use it kind of comically just as the name of it. It says husband and wife, whoever dies first leaves everything to the survivor. And then whoever dies second leaves it equally amongst their children. So we're not going to pick and choose who we love more. We're going to give everything equally. This is one of those issues where if there is a farm that's part of those assets and not all children are participating equally in the farm operation, sometimes assets now need to be sold in order to create this equality. So of my family, I have one sister who's disabled. She was living at home with my mother at the time that my mother passed away. So the family home was her home. When my mother passed away, I had tried to talk with her a number of times of setting up various different estate provisions for my sister, and no action taken was done. And so we were stuck with kind of a tough situation. So when my mother passed away, my sister, her home had to be split up because she was one of 4 children. First off, the house was too big for her. She would have needed to move either way. But you don't want that emotional burden to be forced upon you. So when you're talking about a farm, it's a larger asset. It's an operational asset that is the business itself. If you have people that are being pulled in different directions, money is an ugly thing. So this is a story of where the I love you will tried to segregate equal shares to each child, and not all children were participating in the farm equally. So it was forced to be sold off, liquidated, divided amongst the children. And unfortunately, that farm isn't in operation anymore. We've seen many farm families where a younger generation builds structures on the family land. I have one I worked with over this past year that built outbuildings, lived on the farm itself. And when the parents passed away, unfortunately, as the siblings came in, those buildings that they paid for were part of their parents' estate. And so they then had to repurchase those buildings that they already paid for once because they're having to be split up to be divided based on estate rules. Another family. This is Mike and Sharon. They came to the Land is Your Legacy team, worked with Nationwide to start creating their documents and basically walked away from the situation feeling far more educated, far more prepared, and ready to have their farm continue for many generations. Which family seems more like yours today? Are you feeling prepared? Are you feeling like you've taken the steps necessary for your transition? Or do you feel like you still need to put some action steps in place? When we look at some questions that need to be considered, a lot of this comes down to having an open family dialogue. I love this list of questions here. And the very first two, does the senior generation want the farm operation to continue? I'll tell you, not all of them do. I've sat down with farm families that say they just don't think their children are into it. They don't think that they want to be involved with it. And they care more about having their family harmony and their family success rather than continuing the farm operation. So ask yourself, does the senior generation, do you want the farm to continue? Is that part of the legacy that you want to leave behind? Ask the next generation, do they want the farm to continue? I worked with a family in Pennsylvania early this year. And the senior generation, the parents, were dead set that they knew that their grandson wanted to be involved. He'd been helping out on the farm, and they knew that that's who was going to be taking over the operation. This was probably one question that was never addressed. We ended up going through the Land is Your Legacy program, working with the family in opening up as to what their goals were, trying to work with the parents as to how we can implement and set everything up. And then we had a family meeting. They wanted to talk with everyone as a whole. And the one question that came up was them asking their grandson, are you prepared for this? And the honesty, I was impressed with. Their grandson was in his early 20s, maybe 21 years old. And he was honest and upfront. He wasn't certain that that was the lifestyle that he wanted and that he was fully prepared to take on that operation. He didn't want that commitment quite yet. It was something they had never considered. It changed the dynamic as to how the parents were planning for that farm. Did they need to spend more time mentoring and coaching him, making sure he understands what the farm is and has that passion for it the way that they have through the years? So you kind of have to take a step back as you ask these questions. Not only are you ready to pass on and want to continue the operation, but does the next generation feel the same? Is there any mutual agreement written out as to what your goals are? We all have this grand idea as to what we want in the future, what we think might happen, but have you ever put pen to paper to outline it? It's important. Sometimes, again, it's hard to figure out what was in your head after you've passed on. So if you can sit down with your family and try to create an operational structure and a goal, an outline for the future, it can be a critical tool to make sure everyone's staying on pace. Everyone is progressing towards the same end goal. Create a mission statement. Create a business goal as to what you're looking to do. What is the farm there for? Make sure that everyone's on the same page. Are you farming just to sustain the family and keep everyone there? Are you farming to grow and be bigger in the future? Have you looked at the total value of your assets in the past years? So I deal with investment management, and I love talking with certain investment professionals as they talk about the stock market. Stock market's a terrifying thing. The ups and downs, especially recently, over the past year and a half, we've had some real volatile times in the market. And I had one convey that, especially when it comes to farming communities, the reason why everyone is so terrified of the stock market is because the value changes drastically every day, and it's right in your face. Do you know what the value of your estate is? Your land, your business structure, your cash flow. It's very volatile from year to year. Sometimes you have great years, sometimes you have terrible years. But the land itself, as times develop, you don't have the privilege of having an appraiser come by day in and day out and say, here's what we think your farm is worth. Here's what it was worth yesterday. Here's what it's going to be worth tomorrow. So sometimes we need to take a step back and take a look at what our actual estate value is. Make sure that you understand within state laws and federal laws what kind of estate taxation or estate provisions you might need in place. And then finally, have you planned for how your farm might adapt with anything that's unforeseen, any risks, illness, disability, an untimely death? Unfortunately, it happens all too commonly in farming. It's a high-risk industry. Accidents do happen. And so we want to make sure that your farm and your family is equipped and prepared to be able to deal with anything that does come up in the future. First tool to kind of get started is Nationwide has a program online, laylready.com. So landisyourlegacyready.com. There's some questions in there that you can work through to assess the current structure of your business and how prepared you are for your transition. The folders that Nationwide had put together here that everyone should have on your chairs, there's some tools in there. I'd encourage you to go through it. One of them specifically is a questionnaire. If you open it up on the right-hand side, there's a list of questions here. Some of them say, can your family have an open business conversation without emotions getting involved? Not all of us have thought through that. When we're talking about a business and assets and the succession and transition of our farm, can the family be open and candid about it? So go through some of those questions. Try to get yourself and your family prepared for what a transition might look like for you. As you're going through everything, preparing all of your documents is also important. We encourage everyone, sit down with a professional. Go through the Land is Your Legacy program if you haven't yet. Reach out to various different organizations that offer similar transition programs. So there's a number of different farm or agribusiness agencies that have connections with Nationwide or other entities that offer programs that can help you in your transition planning. Prepare all of your documents. Make sure that you have everything put together. And there's a checklist in the folder as well of some essential documents that are helpful in planning. Things like your estate documents, your wills, your power of attorney, your balance sheet, your profit and loss that maybe your accountant puts together for you every year, your past year's tax returns. There's certain depreciation in there that we want to make sure you're taking into account for the value of your assets. So try to make sure that you have all of your financial records, everything else put together so that you're prepared for going into the planning process. So we've talked about a number of different things here today. We've covered some of the background of Nationwide, why Nationwide is committed to the farming community, where this program came from, and why we think it's so important to get out there, to get to the farm families and make sure that you're prepared for the future. We talked about what the Land is Your Legacy program is, some of the key things to think about, where it is discussing with your family how you want your goals to be outlined, what you think the future of your farm operation holds for it. And we talked about some of the things as to how you can get started, some of the documents to collect, various resources as you're starting to put together the picture of what your football team is. Who is your attorney? Who is your CPA? And are they equipped and educated and well-versed in the nature of your business and what it is that you do? Utilize Nationwide and myself as resources. So Nationwide's Land is Your Legacy team, they're open to take calls. They want to work with you. They want to provide information, and it's no cost. So the one thing that I would point out is through the Nationwide program, they've intentionally put together this Land is Your Legacy transition plan so that they can provide the information and resources to you without you having to pay for it. Now, that being said, again, we can talk till we're blue in the face and write the greatest plans in the world, but it all comes to implementing it. And so when you want to finally take action steps to implement your plan and put things in motion, you may experience some cost. You might have to go sit down with an attorney. What our goal is again, is to act as the quarterback, save you some time in front of them so that you're not wasting time on their clock and racking up your expenses. But expect as you're creating your transition plan, you might have to face some expenses by getting some formal legal counsel, CPA help, or other professional assistance on things. But utilize the Nationwide team. We're here for you. We want to make sure that you've got everything that you need so that you can, again, take a well-rounded look and establish your overall plans. Any questions on everything that we've gone through here? No, Nationwide offers this to anybody. So you just, in essence, reach out and you've got my contact information there. Through Margie with Nationwide or any of the other Nationwide colleagues here, we can get you in contact with who would be a good advisor to work with to start your planning. So. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about the Maryland state tax thing. I think it's 6%. I don't know if the county solves that. So how do we plan for those barriers?
Yep. So estate taxes is always a challenge. They've changed numerous times through the past. I come across people who planned in the 90s when the estate tax exemption was around 500,000. And at this point, most of their plans aren't really doing a whole lot because the exemption is so high. So you spoke to a couple different things. And what I would first off encourage is speak with an attorney, make sure that all of your estate documents are in order and that they can guide you through what to expect from that. As well as a CPA can a lot of times create assumptions for what your tax estimates might be. But a federal tax exemption, it's around 11.4 million right now currently per person. The federal tax provision allows portability, which means that as a couple, you can use an unused portion of a deceased spouse. So if husband and wife, one person passes away, and doesn't pass on assets outside of just to their spouse, then the surviving spouse has both their own 11.4 exemption plus their deceased spouse's 11.4 exemption to pass it to the next generation. So as a couple, from a federal sense, you have portability for that. Maryland state is non-portable. Maryland's, I believe it's around 5.5 million. So it's a lower threshold currently. But it's also non-portable. So if you face a point where you might have a Maryland estate tax, then some things like a bypass trust might be very valuable to you. A bypass trust creates an intermediary vehicle that the first spouse to pass away can pass assets into this trust usable for their surviving spouse, but they have now pulled it out of the spouse's estate. So that when that surviving spouse passes away, they can only use their own 5.5 or whatever Maryland's exemption number is. Maryland does not allow you to use a deceased spouse's exemption. It's a moving target. So the best thing you can do is plan based on the time that you're in. And one thing that we've seen a number of attorneys and accountants using lately is because the exemption is so high currently. Right now, tax law is set to sunset in 2026. So the 2017 tax law is what bumped it from 5.5 million roughly to the 11.5 where we are currently. But that estate exemption is supposed to sunset in 2026. So if you currently have an estate that is over that limit, you can use a gift exemption today, even if it goes away in the future. So if you are to gift part of your estate to a next generation in today's tax law, you can file your gift tax form and take advantage up to that full 11.4 million threshold, even if in 2026 it drops back to 5.5 million. So that's sometimes what people are doing right now, is trying to take advantage of the current tax law, since it is a higher limit than where it has been previously, in fear that it also might get pulled down. Politically speaking, there's no clue as to which way the political winds will turn, and to what they're going to do. Historically, taxes have always gone up. So. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. That's a great approach. So of those list of questions to prepare, the second question was asking the next generation. So we definitely encourage, have the family involved. You don't know what their wishes are until you ask. So absolutely make sure that they're involved through that process, and that you're giving them the opportunity to feel like they're part of it. A lot of times as a senior generation, if they are the ones who, the patriarch or the matriarch of the family, everyone leans to them for what the decisions are and how to proceed forward. As you can start to incorporate them, they now start to feel like they're more of the operation. So you can also just make them become more involved by simply bringing them in with a question like that. Okay. Any other questions for me here today? Who's ready to start planning for your own transition? All right, perfect. Well, thank you everybody for being here today. We do have a survey in the folder. Nationwide wants to try to make sure that these are crafted to give you the valuable information that's going to help you moving forward. So if you don't mind, please take a moment, fill out the survey. Let us know what we did well, what we could improve on, so that we can better build some of these for the future for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all for coming.